Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fifth episode of Cellar Talks. Today we have Jean Belondrade as guest from Belondrade Wines in Spain in Rueda. So stay tuned for a minute or two, and then I will invite Jean. So everybody, if you have any questions prepared, you can ask them in the chat box in the bottom. So where the question mark is, you can add them, and we will answer them at the end of the show. So in the meanwhile, get yourself a glass of wine or anything else to drink, and then we will wait for Jean to join us in a minute. I see some people already joining in the call, so very good. And the question obviously is, what is everybody drinking? Anybody drinking Verdejo at the moment? Or maybe even Belondrade? Tell us what you're drinking at the moment. So let's wait for Jean to join us. I've invited him, so he will be with us in a minute. A Pinot. What kind of Pinot is that? A Pinot Noir? Because then you're in a very different area. That's a good question. Pinot. No Pinot in Spain, I think, but we can ask Jean as well. And another Pinot. So not much white wines. Or is it Pinot Blanc, maybe? That's also a possibility. John, where are you? Just wait for a minute. Pinot Noir. Ah, okay, good. Jean is watching, I see, so now let's ask him to come into the call. If we can get the connection started. Jean.
Hey Niels, how are you?
Good evening. I'm doing well. What about you?
Good, good. Here in Valladolid, the weather is not that cold anymore. I don't know if you heard about that, but we had like this huge snowstorm hitting Spain like a week and a half ago. So we're just recovering from that.
I saw it as well, because you post nice pictures of snow in the vineyard. It looks nice. Yeah. It's not good, obviously, but it looks nice.
No, actually, I think most of the people just got it wrong, because it's. I mean, in Spain, we usually say that it's actually the best water source you can get, because it's just how can you say that melts very slowly. Yeah. So the soils doesn't just simply, how do you say that? The water just goes slowly into the soils, and it's actually good.
Sort of isolation, maybe, on the soil?
There is still actually, that's another part which says that when you get very, very cold temperature, which is actually what happened in the next few days, because I think the maximum last week was probably 2 degrees Celsius positive, and the minimum was something like -8 or 9. So that's what they say. The snow just becomes ice, and the soil actually keeps a warmer temperature than the outside. So the vines are actually protected. So it's all benefit.
So it's good. It's good in the end. Okay. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I don't know where to start, because there's a lot to talk about for the winery, for the family, for everything. And I also see people even speaking Spanish in the chat. I know that there were some people that speak Spanish or are Spanish, so maybe you will see some questions popping up in Spanish. I even got one to do in Spanish, so I can try. And if it doesn't work, I know who sent it, so I will ask her to do it.
I think that between the two of us, we'll have it, all good Spanish, English. We can cover some French and some Dutch as well.
Oh, yeah, French, obviously. You're raised in French as well, huh? I guess.
Yeah, I should.
So that's good. So let's start with a quick introduction from yourself, from your side. So what is your background? And then obviously later we will talk about the winery and the family, but a little bit about Jean first.
So I think that, it's complicated to talk about background without talking about family.
It's
I
part of it.
actually moved to Spain because I was born in Bordeaux, and I actually moved to Spain when I was 12. So that was back in 2001. And, the winery really, the project started in 1984. So I was kind of young, but I can recall almost all the details, all the steps.
It's a big change in your life. You're moving to another country, a
Definitely.
winery.
But I think, I always say that's probably the best decision I've ever taken because I think, when you move with such a young age, at the end, you're capable to totally, I don't know, like totally, how do you say, make this immersion in the culture, learn not only language, but some habits, so it's, I won't say, it was easy, but I think that, as I said, it's probably one of the best stuff I've done. Yeah.
And then you did your schooling, obviously partially in France and then in Spain, but you also went back to Spain, to France later to study.
Yeah, that was later because so when I finished, so when I told you that everything is kind of related to the family, when I moved to Spain with 12 years old, I really discovered what was the project. As I told you, I grew up with Belondrade and within Belondrade, and I think I just enjoyed looking at my father suffering from one side. But enjoying as well what was
just following his passion. That's what you sensed, what you felt, maybe.
I would say that it's not very respectful towards probably I don't know, like a policeman or a nurse or a doctor. But I think there is some part of vocation as well in this work, in this sector. That at the end, if you don't really enjoy it, it can probably become something heavy and that's how I perceive life. I think that really it's too short to at the end do things that you don't enjoy and to drink bad wine as well. That's what we say. So then I moved to Spain and I really decided that I wanted to simply work with the family at some point, very very young, very early, and then that's funny because most of the people in my case would probably have decided to make something related to analogy right away. But I think it's something I really, owe to my grandfather. He used to say that making wine is very easy, but selling it's probably much more complicated. And I don't know why, but most of the people probably think that, running a winery is kind of easy. You just need, to make a good wine and then, everything will work out. But that's totally...
There's a lot of wine in the world that wants to be sold.
Exactly. So I think that's, for me, that sentence was, kind of a revelation, I have to say, from one side. And so I decided to firstly, try to focus on the management part. So I decided to do what we call in France an école de commerce. So let's say much more commercial, formation. Then I started, so in Barcelona, the first year I moved to Canada. I spent 1 year in Montreal, great experience. I could, recommend that to almost anybody, anybody in its 20s, it's probably, great decision. Then I came back to Toulouse to finish all these parts and moved to Bordeaux. In Bordeaux, I did probably my first vintage, my first harvest abroad out of the winery. I spent then a year. And
with which winery was that you worked at?
I was working with the family in the Médoc in a winery that doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, the Médoc
sold and disappeared.
Yeah, but it's in the Médoc. Yeah.
Yes, in the Médoc. Yeah, close to Castelnau. And then I spent the rest of the time in Bordeaux studying what we call the DUAD. So DUAD, it's a program which was designed probably in the 70s, something like that, but by the Université d'Enologie. And it's focused not only on tasting, which definitely is a very, very important part of our job, I would say, but also, winemaking, viticulture, and it was a very, very interesting introduction. And then I decided to come back to the winery, and that's when my father told me that that's the way I tell it. I don't know if
this is your future. This is your future. This is what you did to...
No, not at all. Actually, my father told me that nobody was expecting me. So if I wanted to do something useful, I should just take my luggage and start traveling a little bit.
That's a good. Philosophy, I think.
So getting to know the trade, the markets, and so that's what I did. I spent a few years before taking on to the commercial part. I have to say, as well, being totally honest with you, that it was not very complicated. I really felt attracted to the project because I really thought that I could bring something extra.
Yep.
But being totally sincere as well, it was a project which was already working, and that's probably what my father meant to say. That the wines were already had already a good presence on the market, and
yep.
So that said, I decided to jump on. To hop on, as we would say,
yep.
like a train, right? And then I've been, I think, really related to the winery in a very close way since then. I did manage to escape a few times to Chile to the harvest in 13 in the Valle del Maipo, and then in 14 in the Moselle. If you want my personal opinion, but I think it's always like that. I would have probably enjoyed another harvest abroad. So I don't know.
Yeah, I can imagine
probably,
because the terroirs are different, the way of winemaking is different, the product, the grapes is different, everything is, you can learn so much from doing that. And I hear the same thing from German young winemakers, that a lot of them now go to France, for example, which was not really the case 20 years or longer ago, but now it's really a way of developing your skills as a winemaker.
I would say, that's something I make, just, because I enjoy, making jokes and stuff like that very often about these experiences abroad. I say that I've learned a lot of good things, but I've learned as well how not to do certain things.
Yeah.
That will not apply logically to all the experiences, but I think it's just interesting not only to see how you said, different terroirs, so different soils, different climates, different grapes, but as well, different way to understand this terroir and how to interpret it. And what I mean to say is that very often you get to discover the people who are behind, and you get to understand way better the wines because you know the people, which seems very simple and very logical, but that's the way I perceive it.
Yeah. Good. So, and then you started working in the winery. So we'll now jump into, okay, now it's your work. So, of course, now we will want to talk about the winery.
Don't say that too loud, Niels, because last year I managed to do like an executive MBA. So
you still escape every now and then.
Some jokes, but I think that was something extra that could be brought as well to the winery.
I agree.
More,
So it's very important.
Good experience.
It's only very important not to only look at the art of the winemaking, but the business, like you said, is a very important part. Otherwise, I mean, you can have the best wine in the world. If nobody knows it and they don't want to pay the price for it, then it's...
And another thing I really simply, believe in, Niels, is that probably if you're a winemaker yourself, you probably do, super genuine wines and take the decisions, saying, so I want the wines this year to be like this or like that. But my way to perceive it is that at the end, I probably become a good winemaker, but winemaker probably saying, studying enology and so on. But I think that right now I'm in a point in which I could perfectly hire someone who will be better than me to take technical decisions and simply stay behind to understand, the concept and the project as a whole, and taking the same decisions. Because at the end, I think I've spent almost 10 years involved in the assemblage, in the decisions regarding ripening and harvest and so on. So I think that it's probably it makes more sense for me to bring something positive in the decisions, but to leave it probably in the hands of someone who is much more qualified than myself.
I can totally understand, because let's face it, you're a young guy still, and every winemaker gets only one shot every year. You have one vintage. So if you want to have 30 vintages of experience, you need 30 years of experience. So why don't you hire a guy who's in the 50s or 60s, and then he has this 30 years of experience? And well, in the end, you learn every year side by side, and Okay, I think it's a sane way of looking at, okay, what is my strength at the moment? What do I want to grow into? So there is a path in going into there maybe or not. But I mean, there is no shame in admitting that there's people that can do what you are doing just as good or maybe better. I mean, that's, I think, a good choice, to be honest. So let's show the audience a map. I mean, a lot of people know maybe where you are located. Some other people might not know. It's always a bit difficult with these pictures because they're not always the format or the size that I need. But I found one. This one shows up pretty well. So here we see Spain, and we see the small red circle, which is the Rueda. So when I did my research, I was questioning myself a little bit, how much Rueda are you? Because you are in the Rueda, but you are also quite up north. So this, to be honest, Spain puzzles me sometimes when I talk about comparing with Germany. It's very structured with the terroirs, but also with the vineyards, with the regions. So in Spain, it's a little bit faire less, maybe I should say. So, okay, it's not always structured and strict. But Rueda is the region, and the red circle is where you guys are located, right? This I got correct.
So if you allow me here, Niels, to not be totally politically correct, and because we're probably going to mention something political, if you look at the map of Spain, and if you compare it to I don't know, Italy or France or Germany, as you said, here, let's say that the shape or the delimitation of the appellations doesn't really respond to, let's say, soils, for example, or microclimates or whatever. It's just to tell the truth, it's a very political way to just cut. It's a sad comparison, but if you look at a map, for example, of Africa, how Africa was, like given shape, it's something similar at the end. They decided, to put some villages in, some villages out. And if you take Rueda, as we say it, right here, we see it right here.
This is the Rueda zoom in, basically, huh?
Yeah. So we have from north to south, we have, I don't know, I don't have the exact number, but probably around 120 kilometers, roughly, I would say. And from side to side, east to west, probably a little bit less. But my point is that within Rueda, you have differences of terroir. So the northern parts, I don't know if people can realize that we can see the river, right, the Douro, which is actually where we are located. That will be very alluvial soil. So here, I mean, in these parts, we have much more presence of clay, pebbles, logically, because of the presence of the river, some limestone and some sand, because the sand is always, much more present as well in these parts of the. While if you go to the south, closer to Segovia, where Nieva is, you have much more slates. The altitude is slightly higher as well because we're located at 750, and Nieva is somewhere around, I don't know, I would say 800 something, if I'm not wrong. So the climate is not the same. There it's much more drier. So my point is that when you look at Bordeaux, for example, and even within Bordeaux, you have, I don't know, probably around 60 different sub-appellations. Why is that we have within such a large area just one single appellation? So I think it's something that wasn't done well, and not only in Rueda, but like in the whole country.
In Italy, it's also a mess. So if you look at the way in Italy, how it's done.
In the good way, because at the end, you really have these differences which you can explain. I can say that, I don't, I have, my difficulties to understand Italy. I think it's a very complex country, but I think the differences can be explained. And here, that's, what I'm explaining. You have some question that, makes you wonder why Rueda, or why, I don't know, La Mancha, or why. So, yeah.
So, okay, we see this, and you see for the people that it's difficult to see because it's small on the screen like this, and we're only showing half of it, and then my face is in it as well, so that doesn't really help, to be honest, but okay. The green dots you see is more the concentration of the wineries, or let's say the villages where there is a lot of wineries. So for the audience, you see when you're under the river in the central part, just under, there's a big concentration where you guys are located, and you see the same in the right corner, I would say more southeastern corner. Also there is the slate stone area which you're mentioning. on the right.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. That will be the area of Nieva, and I don't know if probably like the names are so
yeah,
tiny
that's
that I
impossible to
cannot
read,
read it.
but
But so as you said, we're located on the northern part in the village of La Seca, which is meant to be the birthplace of Verdejo.
yeah. So in between, I will just mention this to the audience because other shows I did it at the beginning and people are not already logged in there. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the question box, which is in the bottom. So this is where you can put the questions and we try to answer them at the end of the show. So having that said, because if we put them in the chat, we don't have time to read them as we're having a nice conversation here together. And we will have to taste some wine as well. So there will be no time to watch the chat go by. But you talked about pebbles and then you sent me this. So this is
Exactly.
typical for one of or some of the vineyards that you have, because we talk about the vineyards that you have. There's a lot of different ones, and there are really small ones, there's bigger ones, but it's very diverse.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, like the key, I would say, behind the Belondrade's philosophy. Actually, when we're mentioning pebbles, it's probably one of the things that really brought my parents here. And my father always says, that he was totally impressed when he saw for the first time these pebbles, because it reminded, at some point to the Rhône, right?
And they're even bigger, huh? But they're also this
exactly.
round stones, basically.
Yeah, it's pebbles, so it's more or less the same concept, taking into account that there is an important river close by, and they were supposed to be brought by the defrost, so millions of years ago, and it's actually kind of surprising. But I remember a few years ago we had some friends coming over from France, and they're not related to wine, but the guys actually asked the question, did you guys brought the pebbles here, or no? And they're already there, and the thing is that what's fantastic about this region is that moving. I'm not only, I'm not even going to mention taking the car. You can just walk probably 200, 300 meters, and you get to see these differences in which from one side of the road, you get to see that the color of the soil is like very light, like almost yellow, while on the other side, you have like these pebbles and it's much more reddish. So it's crazy, like the diversity we have in terms of soils. So the concept and the philosophy at the very beginning of Belondrade was, first of all, to make what we call a vin chateau. So vin chateau, at the end, really deciding that the wines we will make will only come exclusively from our own vines. Mm-hmm. And mostly I used to explain that a lot. It's not only a matter of quality, because very often people ask, so is it because you're not sure about what the viticulture is going to do? Not only. I think it's only, it's as well, or probably much more a matter of, let's say, coherence. I don't know if you can say coherence in English, which what I want to say is that on the long term, you can see the evolution of the plots, and you get to know the plots, and you know that on a dry vintage, probably the musts you're going to get are going to be like this, like this, like this, right? And you know exactly how to interpret these musts, how to vinify, right? So that's the picture you were showing. That was probably last year or 2 years ago. We really tried to do a huge work and improvements on viticulture. So we had Julian Palacios, who's the guy with the red sleeves, who's probably one of the experts in Spain in terms of how do you say, pruning, responsible pruning. Yeah. So we're trying, to form the whole team to make sure that when we're pruning, we're not only thinking about what's gonna become with the vine this same year, but what is going to become of the vine within 10, 15, 20 years. So it's really something important.
We're really looking ahead and how it will develop and evaluate throughout time. So
we've seen that we have a lot of problems, with what we call wood disease. For example, ESCA is a huge problem, and nobody really know what to do about it, but we know definitely that by improving and being more respectful while pruning, it's gonna just bring.
It's prolonging also the lifetime and the quality of the vines in the end.
Definitely, that's what we look for. We look for that instead of living 30, 40 years, and at the end, having this decline or declination, in an early stage, that you can just keep on just work with the same vines during probably 60, 80 years. Then it's a matter, that's something very different, but it's a matter of when do you realize that the production is decreasing, and when you realize that that quality is not there neither. Because usually we always explain that you have it's like two lines. You have usually the quality of the must, right, and the age. And there is a point in which they meet, which is, let's say that's like the adolescence or the youth for us humans, and then it decreases. So it's really
You're smiling because you see the dogs, huh?
Yeah.
I also want to talk about the dogs later.
They're kind of young, still.
I saw. That's good. Okay. Unfortunately for the audience, you sent me a nice booklet with a map, and I can do it like this, but I don't have a digital picture. But what was one of the first things that I really liked about the story is how many, and I already said it, how many different plots you have and vineyards you have, and they're really sometimes really small. So the smallest one is 0.2 hectares, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean,
the biggest will probably be 4 hectares. I think it's
Apollonia. So that's not even really big. But I mean, there's a lot of differences between those vineyards and plots.
Exactly.
Also taking into account, obviously, what you were all just saying, that you're also looking into the future on how it will develop and how the vines will develop. But it goes into the philosophy of your winemaking, I think, as well, because you can tell us a little bit about how you guys make the wine. So what's the process, and how do you have all these different vineyards working together to create a beautiful wine?
So something regarding the map you've just shown, there is actually something that most of the people don't know. We're talking about 23 plots, but within these 23 plots, we do, let's say, another like separation. I don't know if you can say that.
Yeah.
But we have a plot, for example, La Cañada, which when we take samples, maturity controls, right, and vinification, we separate it in 4 sub-areas, right?
Yeah.
Cantarranas, more of the same. We have the case of, for example, La Cruz, which is separated in 2 subplots. So we really try to be, it's a matter of details, right? We really need to be, that's what we search for, precision and detail. So as I said, these differences we find within the plots. We're not only talking about differences of soil composition, but very often the orography is different. Let's say that probably the planting pattern is different. The pruning is different. So I don't know how to say that, sistema de conducción. So guyot, cordon, etc. So all these differences take into account that we only work with one single grape variety, or that's what we enjoy saying, because we have a little percentage of other white varieties. So some Grenache, some Roussanne, some Marsanne, some Viognier, but 95% of the estate is planted with Verdejo. So what we do is simply, as I said, we do this monitorization plot per plot. We harvest everything manually, and then we keep, in order to keep these differences alive during the whole vinification. So we keep the plot separated, and we ferment all the wine with native yeasts, so spontaneous fermentations. We don't inoculate, and that's how at the end the wines are going to evolve. So what you see right now in the picture is the cellar, and while we're looking at the cellar, I think it's interesting, because at the end I'm just going to make the link with what I was explaining, coming from the vineyard and entering the winery. So when we receive the grapes at the winery, everything is harvested in 13 kilo crates, right? So we just empty the crates on a sorting table. We have 6 people working a sorting table. This year, for the first time, we've tried with make an interesting investment, which is like mechanical sorting machine, which is very interesting because we have a mechanical sortment, and then we have the manual. So this year, I think we just keep on improving on that matter. Then we're just gonna destem, crush the grape, macerate, and after the maceration, we will taste the must, right? So from one side, we'll have what we call the fluid juice, which is just the juice that comes, from crushing the grape, and from another side, we will have the press. So from one single plot, two different juices, two different musts. We taste the musts and we decide, once again, I'm talking, I'm using a lot this word interpretation because it's all about that. We decide how to conduct this must. So it's kind of a bet you take. You say, so I personally believe that this must have the capacity not only to ferment, but to age as well in barrels. So that's
because this is important for you, the aging in the barrels. We
exactly.
didn't talk about it yet, but your wine is also about wood. And compared to other,
I would say that at the end it's not something which is marking the wine, because that's something I always try to insist on as well. It's not, let's say, a way to make the wine. And what I want to say is that very often in Spain you have this mention very big in the label stating barrel fermented. So it means it's very expensive and very good, right? For us, I think
that's why you don't put it on there.
No, not at all, because I think that fermenting and using barrel at the end, it's an extra tool. It's a way, it's a vector that you're just going to use in order to get to achieve what you're looking for. And in that case, for us, what we're looking for is this micro-oxygenation you're going to get. Probably the tannin that the barrel is gonna leave, and then this capacity to work with very small volumes, making batonnage, and as you said, aging the wines. But to come back to what I was explaining at the beginning, it's not all the musts have the capacity to ferment in barrels. So there is this first selection which is made, and usually we decide. So for example, to give you an idea and to really illustrate what I'm saying, when we have a must which is probably like very fruity, crispy, acidic, but shy, we don't want to just overeat it with oak. So usually what we do in that case, it's search for a much more neutral vinification. So vinification, fermentation, and probably aging in tanks. Okay. And we have the other case, which is probably a must, which have these shoulders, this depth, this complexity. And in that case, we just give it a try, and we send it. We choose the barrel. What I mean by choosing the barrel is that if you have a picture of the cellar, you probably see that we have during a normal vintage from 300 to 400 different barrels. From different coopers, different sizes, different forest of origins, different ages as well. So it's really about, once again, taking a risk and taking a bet. So for example, here, we don't really get to see it yet because, as you see, we're filling the barrel. So usually with choke, we just put like a code, a number, and 2 letters, which means the day of the harvest and the plot it comes from. And here you can see that the barrel is Sylvain from 2016.
16,
right? So it means that in that case, we probably had a must that was probably very, very elegant and delicate, and we didn't want it to use a barrel that was too new or
you take the older barrel for that.
Right.
So you need a lot of different barrels in the way you make wine.
Exactly. And it's about pairing, right? We start pairing very early in order just to find this balance.
But it's very interesting. I mean, it's probably not unique, but if I hear it, it's something. If I compare to others, they make it easier. Well, not easier. They have a very different way of winemaking. You're also making it complex for yourself, but it's what you want to achieve. You're looking for something for what you know that you need to do it this way. There is no other way of doing it. So I think this is a very interesting part of the story of Belondrade. But another part is also, and you also mentioned it a little bit, the style of winemaking comes from your father, who had an idea and moved to Spain, and he saw the soils and the terroirs, but he had obviously a French background and a French style of winemaking. So when he came in Rueda, that was very different than all the other winemakers had, or most of them had, I guess.
So I think that there are 2 things to take into account to answer to your question. The first one is that Spain 30 years ago was a very different country. Back then, probably, so people have been making wine in Spain for ages, centuries or more, since the Roman times, probably, or Phoenicians. The thing is that probably there wasn't the professionalization or the industrialization we already had in France back then. So that was probably the first thing, because starting a project from scratch means obviously a huge inversion.
Yeah.
And once again, if you have a special idea, it means that you need probably to be the first one. But the reason why we really ended in Rueda is because so I have two sisters, Apolline, who's the oldest, and Clarice, who's the youngest. And my parents had another kid who was named Diego. So he was my older brother, and he passed away when he was very young. So actually, we're talking about 1988.
Yeah.
So my parents started searching for the place where San Diego was born. So obviously, we're talking about, back then, no Wikipedia, no Google Maps, nothing. So they found it, searching in encyclopedias, dictionaries, maps. They found this village called San Nicolás del Puerto, which is lost in the mountains 1 hour away from Seville, northern direction. So they just went there, took the car and drove to San Nicolás. They found a small estate, decided to buy it. So it's been almost 30 years now. We have pigs and horses. So and that's actually there when they discovered and they tasted Verdejo for the first time. And what probably struck them, because people don't have this image of Verdejo, and I think it's a huge pity. Last week, for example, when you guys were talking about Riesling, I think that, when you talk about Riesling or you talk about Chardonnay, we talk about two varieties that have probably the greatest image when talking about white varieties. You say that, and it's almost, there is like a capital letter at the beginning, and people say, well, this is serious. And what happened with Verdejo, it's not the case, and probably it's one of the biggest mistakes people can make, because it's a variety which is totally unique. So indigenous from Spain. It's a variety which has natural acidity, natural structure, and which is super polyvalent. So you can do almost, any type of wine you could think. Yeah. And so back then, my parents just thought, my father said, well, there is like a structure, there is acidity. We could definitely try to make, something.
You can build on that.
Worthy. Exactly. Search simply for longevity, right? Try to explain this wine within a different prisma. Yeah.
So that's why the estate is also named San Diego?
Exactly. That's the reason why.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now we get it. Yeah.
And that's the reason why our second vin is called La Bologna, and we do as well a rosé from a single plot, which is called Clarissa, and that's the reason why, it's my.
So you know what question is going to come next?
Okay, surprise me.
Where is the Jean? Or when are you allowed to get your own wine?
No, probably I have to say that first thing first. I really love my sister's name. Mine is probably not that original. It's probably one of the most given name in France. I love my name, but it's probably not that original. And the thing is that I decided, as I told you at the very beginning, to get involved in the winery, which is not the case of my sister. So I just managed to manage and work every day in the winery. So I don't really need to have my wine.
You and me have a good report, so I can make a joke like this. I know that you're not waiting for a wine with your name on it. Maybe a vineyard or a plot with your name on it.
I actually have. There is a plot called Juan on the map, which is if you have it in France, leaving the winery, you take left, and it's probably 300 meters. It's a very small one. And this one is called Juan for a very, actually funny anecdote, is that when I was probably, 13 or 14, something like that, my father asked me for my birthday. So what do you want? Do you have any presents in mind? And I think he was probably expecting something like, PlayStation, something easy to find. And I said, I want a plant,
Okay.
Said, okay, let's do that. And now it's.
Let's take one and give it your name. Yeah, that's nice. I didn't know that. I mean, a lot of people don't know this probably. So we have some good insight news here. So enough talking. I mean, we can talk hours about the winery and the vineyards and the grapes, because it's a great grape. And I'm happy to talk about Verdejo in the end. I mean, we talked about Riesling before. I personally like Verdejo as well because I like Riesling, and there's a lot of comparison between the two. So for me, it comes naturally to value both grapes and wines. But let's talk a little bit about the wines. You have a collection of 3 wines at the moment. Maybe you run us through them quickly before we we talk about the wine that we're going to taste? You
Okay,
already
so
mentioned.
that would be, as I just mentioned before, we have
Yep.
Clarissa, which is a single plot wine, very sandy plot with a nice inclination, nice orography, facing southeast, and it's planted in Échala, planted mostly with Tempranillo and some Syrah, and we do this what we call rosé de saignée, so it's we only use the fruit and juice. But we do look for a long maceration, to extract color and some, let's say, some texture, some structure as well.
It's not a Provence rosé if you look at the color.
It's all the opposite, because Provence, they look for this very, very light tone and very, very watery. That would be probably much more similar to what in Spain people know, like no, I lost the word, but they have like this very intense rosé that people used to drink back then in the villages, and we do only 5,000 bottles, which is like a small project. Then we have Quinta Polonia, which is the second wine, or let's say different interpretation of the philosophy. So in Apollonia we search for much more, let's say, freshness. We probably look for something much more varietal as well. It would be much more representative of Verdejo in comparison with probably Belondrade.
Maybe I'm saying something wrong here, but correct me if I do. But if people like the more traditional Verdejo, that would be more appealing to them, or I wouldn't say that the other ones are not interesting, but it's style.
No, definitely. You know what? I will say that, Niels, in a different way, is that probably Apollonia is a good doorstep to Belondrade's philosophy, which means that because I have to say that we're kind of pioneers while conceiving Belondrade, but we're pioneers as well by conceiving Apollonia, because nobody was actually doing this blend with right now. Apollonia is roughly 30 to 40% of wine which was fermented in barrels of different sizes, capacities, toast, and 60 to 70% of wine fermented in tank. So then we just keep the wine on the lees for a little while. So I would say that it's probably much more similar to the traditional style, as you mentioned, but I think we're not quite there.
No, I know, but if you talk about 70-30%, that also indicates that this 30% is also a key maker in the whole wine. So it's not about only about focus on the still and fermentation in still tanks. It's, you still have your own signature and your way of winemaking, which is very much the Belondrade way.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and then we have the third one, because let me get it. This one, the famous orange label.
I think we have the same one.
Yeah, we have the same one. So we have the three labels, but this one is the orange label, and this is well. Tell us a little bit about this one. So
first of all, I think I really like the way you introduced it, right? The orange label, because very often, the last names are French. Belondrade is my father's name, my father's last name, and Lurton is my mother's last name. And the thing is that, so obviously we're looking at French names that are probably were not that common in Spain back then. So a lot of people at the very beginning used to say, oh, I want the orange label. And what is true is that back then as well, picture, the market in 1996, a white wine with an orange label was, something totally disruptive.
Very strange.
Yeah, we had like a very, very interesting anecdotes as well of, people asking for the wine in different ways. But I think, there is a direct link between the decision, why we pick this color and the type of the wine. If we were being disruptive in the way we conceive the wine, we needed to be disruptive as well in the way we introduced and presented the wine to the consumer, right? As I said as well before, Belondrade here, we look for a much different expression. We look for longevity. We look for much more depth and complexity. So I think you actually asked the question before the interview, and here with Belondrade, the soul of the project really was to make what we call in French vin de garde. So if people have the occasion, which is probably happens very, very little, I would say that's probably 95% of Belondrade Lurton is actually drunk within the year. So we need to release a wine which is prepared to be and ready to be drunk. But the thing is that we really, conceive the wines in order to just evolve and reach simply a different dimension within 5-6 years. And that's actually probably when you've shown one of the first pictures. So we had the table with the different glasses. That's the part of the assemblage, in which we try just to make this gigantic puzzle, putting together this one. So we're trying to put together, picture 300 different barrels with different personalities, different levels of acidity, of just different structures, different tones on the nose, on the mouth, and that's probably where, in my opinion, where this becomes really challenging, because we're not looking for a wine which we say, oh, okay, this is good, we're going to bottle it and it's going to be ready to be, because we really need to project ourselves and jump mentally in 5, 6, 10 years and say,
so you're taking into account that the wine needs the 5 more years, and you're trying to get to that momentum, and that takes time, and that takes time even after it's bottled. Because, okay, it's a nice wine. We talked about it before, you're right. It's a great wine to drink. But if people would buy it, and this is my suggestion to the audience, first of all, you buy a box. If you cannot get a box, because these wines are very hard to come by. So I know it's difficult to buy them at some point, even in Holland, but also in other countries. At least buy 2 bottles then. And you can open one and drink it. And the other one, put it away for 5 years. And then you will see some more magic coming out of the bottle, huh?
Definitely, and personally, I think that if you ask me, probably 20 years ago, people was not really ready for that, and that's an interesting anecdote as well. So every year this year was the exception, logically, because of the whole situation. But we've spent 5 years taking the team and traveling to a different wine region. So went to Bordeaux, went to Champagne. We went to Galicia, went to the Douro, and we went to Rioja. And Rioja, we visited, among other wineries, López de Heredia, so Tondoña, the world famous Tondoña. And so Maria Jose was saying, the owner was saying that because their wines, it's true that they're marvelous, and people are starting to discover that, wow, you can drink like a delicious Spanish white wine from the 70s or the 80s, right? And she said something very funny, which was that probably 5 years ago, any type of oxidation in a white wine, people just would take the bottle and put it down in the sink and throw it away. And right now, people almost don't want to drink anything that doesn't have at least 3, 4, 5 years, which is funny, to see how the market evolves. And I think that it's interesting, because we're just right there. As I said, we're being able to make wines, to conceive wines that are ready to be consumed, to be drunk, to be enjoyed. But for the people who has the capacity, and now there are more and more people open to that. If you wait 5-10 years, it's beautiful. We've had recently 13, 14, 15, even a 7 not that long ago, and it's amazing. It's really
I think I told you even there was a sommelier, and maybe he's watching, or you will watch it later, and he accused me of murdering a child when I posted that we're going to taste the 2018. But we're going to go and do it ahead anyway. We're going to go ahead and do it. So
but just picture that we're tasting 18, and we have released 19 in December. Okay. On the 15th of December. So the thing is that I had 19 home, and I needed to come back to the winery today, because I don't know why I was thinking of tasting 19, and then I realized, oh no, we're tasting 18. So
it's a little bit better. It's a year more, so I think that's good. Yeah. So about this wine, because this, and compared to the orange label, it's become an iconic, I would say an iconic wine. So I was very happy to have you guys on the show, because the orange label is an iconic label, and we Dutch people, we like orange, but we'll talk more about that as well. But tell us about this great wine, because it's,
so I think that, first of all, something super important as well for us is that when you look at this type of wine, vintage has a weight which is, I won't say extreme, but we're trying to reflect in our wines what happened in the vineyard. So we have 18, for example. We're coming from even if we're coming back, further on, we had a vintage like 17, which was very challenging because it was a very dry vintage. We had 18, which what we're tasting right now, probably much more balanced. I would say probably the definition per se of balance. More expectation, more rainfalls than expected. I would say something like 480 liters, something like that, which is a little higher than what we're expected to and what we're used to. And almost all the rainfalls, or a big part, was concentrated in let's say winter and spring. So perfect for like a nice budding.
Yep.
We had a late sprouts, and which is then less and less common. Late harvest. I'm saying late because the normal thing in the area is to harvest on the 3rd week of September.
Yep.
For 2019, we started on the 19th of September, but we're just seeing that more and more. 2017, we started harvesting the 25th of August, which is like the earliest date we ever had. So when we talk about climate change, which is some people are not still convinced about that. It's just crazy. So yeah, I was saying that vintage is definitely something important.
What's your favorite vintage is a question that pops up. It's a good one when we're talking about the vintages. It's difficult to choose a child.
No, it's definitely difficult, but I think that and it's not only for me, the most, the vintage we usually appreciate or admire the most, usually are the most challenging to do. So in our case, for example, I know that 2007 and 2013, which probably are the worst vintages in the area, because we're talking about very Atlantic, very rainy vintages.
Very low yields.
But, like the evolution you get on these two, it's just amazing. Then, for example, if you skip from 13, which still has, right now this super freshness, this acidity, this tension, you jump to 14, which is the opposite. You have an evolution which is already there. You have like this salinity, this concentration, which probably you don't find in 13. So I think, that's actually what I told you on WhatsApp. If, at some point, probably I don't know, next year, if you run out of topics, it would be interesting to make like a vertical and talk about these differences, because I think that's, that's where the real difference really lies,
I think we should do a poll, and I will ask the audience if they like us to do a vertical. But if we do it, let's make a promise that I come to the winery and we do it at the winery, because
Definitely.
That would be the best.
You're
to see it at the
invited.
place where it's all happening. And somebody wants you to bring some back to DC. So I know you've been to the States a couple of times, but apparently you didn't leave enough wine when you was there last time.
Hopefully I can start. I won't say start traveling again. It's really nice as well, to at the end experience this moment, this situation in which I think that our priorities radically changes. We start thinking much more about family, about our work. I have the ability right now to be every single day at the winery, which is something that I didn't used to do. But coming back to what Jordi just said, really, if I have the possibility to travel back to the States again, it would be great. And I definitely need to send a pallet before getting there, because I know that we'll probably have a very nice.
They're unicorns in the US.
Sorry, unicorns, you said?
They are unicorns, so they're really rare.
So usually unicorn, in my opinion, that's how I perceive it. Once again, the vintage character makes it even more special. Usually when you see a unicorn, it's just like a horse with a horn, but when it's a bottle, I think that the vintage as well takes a totally different perception. And I think that it's complicated, because once again, it's like religion or politics. Everybody have probably a different definition of unicorns, but I'm what I'm glad to hear, it's simply that people enjoy when pulling the cork of a bottle of Belondrade, and they get to celebrate special moments. My father used to say actually that the best compliment you can get is that that our wine is the signature of a moment, and that's probably the nicest thing you can hear. At the end, when you say unicorn, it's this type of wine that you know about, but you never have the opportunity to taste. So I'm glad, I won't give any names logically, but I'm glad not to be neither in this category in which, there are only 10 bottles reaching every
Yeah.
country and it's impossible to get. I think that's, and I'm very proud of that with the distribution we have not only in Spain, but, worldwide and much more. I think if they are looking at us from the Netherlands, we work with a fantastic distributor in Netherlands. And I think, that's something that they managed to simply, they get their allocation every single year and they manage to simply distribute it very wisely in order to have the wine presence in the places where we need to be, but not to have any shortage neither. That's very complicated to get. Huh?
Well, I've read interviews for some years ago already, and then with your father, that there was already somebody asking, why don't you make more Belondrade wines? Because the world probably is asking for it, so why don't you just increase? But he has a very own philosophy about that, I think, as well. But
I think it's not only a matter of philosophy. I mean, you're definitely right that probably you cannot make 1 million bottles of Belondrade Lurton, but it's a matter as well. You have the picture right now. This picture we're looking at. You have the cellar at the back, and I mean right now the cellar is full. We cannot.
with so many barrels, huh?
Yeah. So we should. One thing is, I don't know, building a new cellar, which I don't really, think would be suitable. Yeah. Another thing is that then you have a person, you have people behind the wine, and it's not only about machines and have, I don't know, like 2,000 barrels and saying, okay, this barrel have this temperature right now, or this acidity, the malolactic is going like this and like that. It's as well enough the capacity to keep a certain power and decision, on what's occurring in the cellar. So it's almost impossible to keep the same quality, I would say, and the same personality in the wines, by producing, I don't know, like 10 times more. So
I totally agree. By the way, now still about this one. What are we tasting? Because okay, we have the pleasure of tasting the wine and drinking it, but of course not everybody has it. So maybe tell us a little bit what the wine is about in terms of the taste and the flavor what we get.
So taste, Niels, and I have to break the ice saying that. I always say that at the end, the tasting part is something very personal, which means that we all have like different level of detection and tolerance towards different molecules, and more of the same with the palate. Like the traditional map of the tongue. It's something which was probably made up or simplified, but it's the reason why we don't have the same taste and the same way to perceive things. But mostly, I think that here in Belondrade, probably what I would put in front to explain the profile of the wine. So first of all, like this probably varietal notes like fennel, for example. Fennel is very typical of Verdejo. I think, you have this presence. You have notes of hay, like cut grass, dried cut grass. Mm-hmm. You have, obviously, because we're talking about a young wine, you have notes of toasted bread, which I think are totally integrated. That's what I'm very proud about. That at the end, we're not saying, like the barrel is right there. Yeah. Actually, to come back to what we were saying before, I think that probably one of the best compliments you can get as well in a wine tasting is, saying, there is barrel fermentation, barrel aging behind the wine. Surprising. So, which means that we have achieved.
So people don't notice it, but it's there to build the wine.
It's not noticeable. Very often, I think, and I mean, we're coming very far away from that. When you look at the wine sector, Spain as well, I mean, 10, 15, 20 years ago, probably, I would say the wines were just, like over-ripped, just over-oaky. And if you ask someone who knows Belondrade for a long time, I think logically we have, managed to polish the wine and to create wines that will be more and more refined and elegant. But the very first vintages, I had the opportunity to open, for example, in 1999, not that long ago, and you see that simply the production, let's say the aging was different, the conception of the wine was different. We're using smaller barrels, we're using toasts which were much more present. So probably it was different, but as any other project, you just polish, you take every single vintage, as you said, you have one shot, and you try to improve what you've done. In the last one, right? So on the nose, I think you have, this as well, notes of I would say agrumes, so citruses. But then the more you wait, that's something I love. You know, when you talk about the evolution of Belondrade, you get as well these peaches, you know, like peach aromas. But then with evolution, you get I don't know how to explain that, like jelly, right? When you're talking about jelly, that's something very English for me, which is the bitter orange marmalade, right?
Okay,
This
yes,
type
yes,
of
yes.
notes that you can find in the wine when you really achieve after 6, 7, 8 years. And that, in my opinion, is, you know, that's gourmand, right? That's something you want to just, you know, bite. And so
a bite. I think that's the right word to connect to that. Okay, maybe we go to some questions. Before we go into the questions, because there is one question which I want to relate to as well. As you know, I'm Dutch and we're about Holland. We're already happy that you have an orange label, but okay, we heard the rumor, or it's not a rumor, I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, that this wine actually was the favorite of Johan Cruyff. Is it true? First of all?
To tell you the truth, I've heard this story like a long time ago, and I would say that now I know it's true because I would say 3 years ago I organized this New Year's Eve at one of my friends' places in Barcelona. So I took care of the wine selection, the whole menu, and so for the wine, logically I decided not only for the wine, for the cheeses, for the salmon. I got in touch with our distributor in Barcelona, who is Vila Viniteca, which is, you know, probably one of the best in Europe. They have an amazing selection, and they didn't have any oysters. Logically, it's a different sector, but I asked them, so do you have any recommendation to buy oysters in Barcelona? And they told me, you should go to this place, which is just, you know, probably a 10-minute drive from here. And this guy, he probably have the best selection in Barcelona. So took my car, drove there, and I start speaking with the guy, very nice guy. And so I introduce myself at some point, and I'm Jean Belondrade, and he starts, well, you don't know who was your probably best customer and best ambassador. And he told me that Johan Cruyff used to, when he was living in Barcelona, that he used to go, I don't know how many times a week to just eat oysters and drink a bottle of Belondrade. So I would say that probably
a good combination.
Very close source.
Oysters and Belondrade.
Sorry?
Oysters and Belondrade. It's a good combination.
Which is a good combination, definitely.
So the question that I got from the audience was, did you ever meet Johan Cruyff? But then the answer is no. But you know now,
I would love it because I really, you know, put him between the best players. You know that being French, it's complicated to not to say that for Zinedine Zidane, it's one of the best players to ever set a foot on the pitch. But I really think that more of the same, you know, Maradona and Cruyff are definitely in there. And then we're not getting in the debate of Ronaldo.
No, but it's a nice
Messi.
story. It's a nice story. And having that said, your wine is on the wine list at some of the biggest or best restaurants in the world. It even was when it was still open at El Bulli. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
That was actually one of the first customers. My father would probably tell the story in different way or with different words. But the thing is that El Bulli was a real breakthrough, you know, in all the terms. And I think that you know, all the wine producers in Spain, they should just, you know, like put a statue to Ferran Adrià, to Julie Soler, who are just, you know, the two managers and the two owners, let's say. So it's true. At the very beginning, they were always searching for these, you know, different projects, and that's how Belondrade probably got into the list with the first vintage, 1994. And the funny story is that I think Televisión Española, so the Spanish public channel, did this how do you say, a documentary on El Bulli, and they were shooting like this truck. Deloading, you know, people taking out from the truck different stuff, and among this stuff there was wine, and there was an orange case, an orange box with Belondrade, and some guys actually asked my father, so how did you do that? How much money did you pay? You know, like probably one of the best advertising you could do back then, and that's how we.
the orange is what helped you stick out, and it helps you stick out all the time because
it's
people
crazy
see it, they don't forget
you
it.
get in a restaurant and it's just so easy to spot not only a Belondrade, because Belondrade, I mean, orange, definitely, you know, it's very eye-catchy color, but you look at Apollonia or Clarissa, and the label is kind of similar. They're very, very neat. And the colors are so bright and so intense that as soon as you get into a restaurant, very often you say, okay, here we know that we have a good client.
That's why I'm sure that people, even the people that didn't taste it yet and have seen this now, they will recognize it next time. They will buy it because they're obviously curious about after this show. But then we'll see it. They will not miss it. I'm sure of that. So that's I think it's a smart move. Whoever made the choice to go with the orange label and the blue, I mean,
definitely.
That was a good choice. Good. Okay. Then other question is, how is the climate change worrying you guys? Obviously, it's a theme for every winemaker at the moment. So is there any precautions or measurements that you're taking for this? You already talked about different plots and always looking into different directions, but that's not because of the climate particularly.
No, generally speaking, when we talk about, for example, orientation, it's, I mean, one of the first decisions you take when you're planting. So you take obviously I don't know how to say that in English, the rootstock, yeah.
Yep.
Logically, then you take the I don't have the correct words in English, but you choose logically the type of variety you want to plant. You decide of the planting pattern. You decide obviously of the orientation, and depending on what you're searching for, on how the plot is positioned. Probably you want something cooler or something hotter in order to get what you consider right maturity. So the thing is that once you've taken this decision, it's obviously complicated to change it. But in terms of, I would say, for us, probably searching, first of all, coming back to what were the basics in terms of planting patterns. Now we're talking about that. We're going back to what we call Marco Real, which is one vine per 3 meters, 3 meters of difference on the wide and on the length, right? And that's what people used to do a few, tens of years ago. So we're coming back to that because we see that simply the soils and the climate does not match what people were doing, following much more like the Bordeaux trend of searching, you know, densities of, I don't know, like 9 or 10,000 vines per hectare, which is crazy. So we're going back to that because we see that at the end the vines can manage to get their roots just, you know, deeper and deeper. But we're as well trying to make a huge work on what we call the foliar. Well, I don't know if it's the correct word in English neither, but the foliar cover. So the leaves, we just, you know, try to protect exactly to protect the how do you say the bunches. As well, you know, making a proper work in terms of green harvest to probably take out some extra bunches and as well, you know, try to find good maturity. But that's one of the, let's say, biggest challenges we have. So we're trying to use the let's say the tools we have in hands, but right now it's very very complex probably. But playing with as I said, you know, the yields, playing with yields. Playing with different weights probably to irrigate because at some point it probably become necessary. And as I said, you know, all these different probably tools that you have. But right now, as someone already said, the only other solution we have is to go to Norway and plant some Pinot or some Chardonnay. And probably in a few decades,
the champagne houses are buying plots in England as well. So
exactly.
Why shouldn't we all have to go up north a little bit. So who we see on the picture here? Can you tell me? Because these two dogs.
It's my father.
Your father.
We're pruning olive trees because we're making this olive oil at the estates as well. And so we're pruning olive trees last year, and the two dogs, the one on the left, it's a female, and the one on the right is a male. But back then they were probably like 5-6 months years old, so they were still puppies, and they're following my father.
Okay. What are the names?
The female is Vera because they were born in the area where, I don't know if you know pimenton, which how do you call that in English? Pimenton is paprika,
Yeah.
Paprika is very common in Spain, and the place where actually the plant is planted, the pimiento, it comes from an area in the Extremadura region, which is called Vera. So you have different villages called Villanueva de Vera, I think, or something like that. And we actually went to get these dogs right there, and the male names is Festin. And I actually picked this name because I remember watching this documentary on about Paul Bocuse a few years ago, and one of his dogs was named Festina. I was like, well, this is probably the best name for a dog. So I knew that, he was going to be named like that. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, we got a question in Spanish. And now it comes because obviously I can't see if she's still watching, but we will get back to that. The question is, let me find it. ¿Qué significa Belondrade para ti? So I know what it is in English and in Dutch. My pronunciation is not. I mean, I only lived in Spain for 6 months. I tell you a story now. Huh? I lived in Spain for 6 months, but I lived in Lloret de Mar, so you don't learn really Spanish there. So this is what my experience is. But the question is pretty obvious. What is typical for Belondrade? Can you tell us?
What does Belondrade means to you in that case?
Aha, even better. Good.
Yeah.
What does it mean for you?
I think it's a tricky question because I mean, logically.
She's watching. I see her. She's clapping her hands now. So
there is something related to the family there. I mean, to give you a clear answer, I think that Belondrade for me it's a legacy. Probably it's a challenge as well because it means that probably I don't know if you had the opportunity to probably talk about that. I think in your last interview, probably when you're talking, there are some dynasties that has been making wine for centuries. In our case, it's a pretty recent project. We're only 26 years old. And my father was kind of a breakthrough as well when he arrived to Valladolid because it was like this crazy French guy putting Verdejo in barrels. So people was, looking at him in a very weird way. So it's true that you can, I get asked the question very often. So, are you not afraid to always be your father's son? And, I think... It's something very very normal to question, and much more in our sector, in which family is so important and tradition and everything. But I think that I'm not pursuing. I don't want to be a copy of my father, which is nice. I think he's an amazing guy. I really admire him in all the ways possible, and I love him. But I think that simply I'm bringing, and I'll probably keep on bringing a different approach to Belondrade, and that's the beauty of a dynasty, of a legacy. That probably, if at some point I can, share that with my kids, probably they have the opportunity to bring something different, and that's how you.
And also, what you learned in other countries, what you talked about, these experiences, they also add to it, and everything that brings what builds you then gets translated into the winery as well over time.
No, definitely, and I don't know, coming back to what you said before, you have like wineries. For example, you look at Clos Saint-Tulle in Alsace. I think it's been in the family for 400 years already. So how can you not fall in love with something like that?
Yeah.
That you carry on. It's so I would say it's in some part a responsibility, but it's. I cannot find a word to express how lucky
it's a blessing as well in that case. Yeah. So Inma, gracias por. Okay, yeah, I will stop here. I don't want to embarrass myself too much, but thank you for the answer, Jean. So about the question from our guest from last week, we talked about it. So obviously, you said about 25 years. The winery is now since it started, pretty young. If you compare to last week's guest, that was like 4 centuries. So different story, but also family company. The question was, did your father change his philosophy with what he started and how it became now? So what during those years did he have to change his philosophy in the winemaking, in the customers he wanted to attract, or anything like that? And what would be the changes the big changes that you've seen?
So complex question, very deep as well. And
just take one part of the question.
No, and there is philosophy, there is family, there is. So I would say it's the perfect question. I think that probably what really makes Belondrade a success, it's obviously very subjective, and anybody can have a different point of view. But I consider Belondrade
at
a
least you
success.
sell out every year, right?
I mean, that's definitely another way to
success.
consider it, another factor. But I think that success is when you take a decision, you see things very clearly, and you just stay put. And even if you're going upstream and you need to swim very hard, which is actually what my father did. The first vintage, we produced 10,000 bottles of Belondrade. Almost all of them sold between the States, Japan, and some to the UK. But in Spain, nobody was drinking, first of all, white wine. It was still mostly, and it's still, as of today, a red drinking country. But not only that, people was not spending much more than just a few euros, a few pesetas back then in a bottle. Another factor is that the first vintage of Belondrade, the regular price, the market price for a bottle of Verdejo was 100 pesetas, and the first vintage release of Belondrade was 1,000 pesetas, so 10 times
the difference is huge.
The market price. So I mean, you really need to be able to hang on and say, so this is going to work, and we just need to keep on going. And another thing that probably made the difference, that we're probably the first white winery in Spain to commercialize white wine through a system of allocations. I think that probably, I don't know if Torres or Chivite has done something similar, but they had other wines as a backup. Both Torres and Chivite were producing red wines. But 100% white winery, and sticking to that and saying, so that's the way we're going to work, and that's going to be like that for all the clients.
It takes courage, but it also takes, you have to suffer as well, because it doesn't always bring you straight away what you success that you need.
To be sincere, I think that if you ask my father, probably Belondrade started to be really, I would say, a success financially speaking, probably in 2007, 2008. Something like that, because believe me, I mean, that's something people don't really realize, but with the costs you have, working all the viticulture, working organic, everything, all the pruning, as I said before, we try to do it, internally. We harvest everything manually. I don't know, like spontaneous fermentations, all this type of stuff. There is a cost, which at the end, makes us able to reach our goal. And so making something, reaching excellence is not cheap. So that's, and you need to stick to that to reach excellence.
So maybe the answer to the question, to conclude on that, is that there was not much change because he didn't want to change too much in his philosophy. He stuck with his philosophy very much, and then because of that he had some headwinds, but in the end it became a success, and because maybe his perseverance to stick to his philosophy as well.
Yeah, no, totally. It's my father, if you want to use like one adjective to define him, I think that perseverance is definitely one of the top three.
That's a good one. That's a good one to have. So I see one more question popping up, and then we go to the question for our next guest, because we're running already 15 minutes behind, and I don't know, maybe they're going to cut us off at some point with Instagram. I don't know how that works. It used to be 1 hour limitation, so we're already in the extra time here. Yeah, we're in the extra time, overtime. So the question here on screen is, could you talk to us? There's a risk that we're going to spend a lot of time on this. Could you talk about something about your red wine projects as far as they're taking place? Well, other projects. I can make it
very quick if you want.
Oh yeah.
I can make it very quick. We had a project. We started in the Arribes area, which is close to Portugal, actually on the border with Portugal, working with native varieties, Bruñal, Rufete, mostly, which is still, on a very small scale. It's single plots. So we've been working on that project for probably 6-7 years, but it's a very, very complicated area. We had hail, we had as well a fire. So it's definitely, when you say there is something behind that tells me not to do it. So it's kind of a challenge. And then we're just releasing right now our latest project, which is something we're really running on a different side of Belondrade. Which is red wine in the Priorat BRC, Priorat region. So probably, mostly Garnacha and Cariñena from a single plot facing north, like an amphitheater with terraces, and just an amazing tour. You know, Priorat, I always say that it's probably a region you have, you know, something magic. There is like an ambience. You need to be there to feel it, but it's something, you know, just unique.
Yeah. So maybe also we talked about this. I have to mention it. So people buy at least 2 bottles. This is the message. So you stick one away for 5 years. If you can buy a box, you buy a box. Serving the wines, don't drink them too cold because 13 degrees you're recommending, and decanting. So give it some air.
Exactly.
Otherwise,
you're missing the wine out. 30 to 40 minutes before. But once again, not too cold, because at the end you kill the good stuff and you keep the bad stuff. The bad stuff, it's okay, and I hope there's not much in it, but you kill the good stuff as well.
Well, you will never know what you missed. I mean, there's so much more, and then that's what you're missing out on. Last question for you is then for our next guest. We will talk about wine puzzles. And well, I've already told you that the next week we're gonna have a nice talk about that. What would be your question regarding the puzzles? Because it's a very different topic than winemaking, but they're very detailed. I can tell the audience they're very detailed on certain wine regions like France, Spain, and Italy, and they're really good puzzles. But we'll talk more about that later. But what would you do? What would you ask in a question about the puzzles?
So I think, you know, I actually thought about the question when you mentioned the possibility of, you know, leaving a question. And after the confinement, the quarantine, I think that almost all of us, we managed to do at least one puzzle. Maybe not to finish it, but we all started one. And I actually enjoyed the activity. The thing is that I don't enjoy sharing the puzzle. I'm kind of, you know, I would say not competitive, but, you know, this type of stuff, I get nervous sharing. So I wanted to ask her who within the wine sector, maybe a producer, a sommelier, a critic, who would she share a puzzle, let's say 2,000 piece puzzle, which is already, you know, like intense.
It takes some time,
Yeah.
So assuming that she wants to share, because if she's like you, she doesn't want to share anyway.
if she doesn't like to share, then
that the answer
I would say that quick. Then we can do both of us a puzzle, the same puzzle, but separately, and we do I don't know, like a contest to see who finishes it first.
That's a good one. That's a good one. So thank you for the nice talk, Jean. It was really a pleasure, and I hope to pick up on where we left, because there's much more to talk in time. For the audience, we're also setting up season 2 already. So next week is the last episode, unfortunately, for Cellar Talks. But then after that, in February already, we will be back. I have 6 guests, which we will announce over the weekend. So there's some great winemakers, not from Spain. Maybe you can give me a tip from somebody in Spain as well, but from France. So one you will like from the Rhône. So that would be very interesting for you. And you can guess later, maybe you know who we're talking about. And Germany as well, and South Africa. So we're going in very different directions here, but this was very nice. Rueda and Verdejo and Belondrade are very close to my heart. So I'm happy that you could spend the time.
Thank you very much.
Maybe you want to thank the audience, or you have a final remark before we close down and
shut
down the lights here.
I'm probably gonna thank you first for having me. I think it's, you know, always a pleasure to talk about, you know, Belondrade and the family and the project. So I think that you have a very, very interesting format with the Cellar Talks, with different interviews that I really strongly recommend for everyone watching. So yeah, thanking all the people that have, you know, managed to spend a few minutes of their Friday evening with us. So congratulations, and Niels, you already know it. We're waiting for you at the winery. So whenever everything settles down, catch a plane or car.
You already sold me with the vertical.
And we'll be waiting for you with the vertical.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, Jean. Have a nice day.
Thank
and my regards to the weekend, to the family, and good luck with all the projects and everything going on.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.